Right, in case you don't know me, my name is James McPherson, and I'm a health and safety specialist, and but we're also human performance specialists. So what that is like human behaviours. It actually comes from oil and gas and aviation. So we take a lot of stuff they do in there to try and reduce human error, and we try to bring that over into normal work, was what we call it. We're also fire safety specialists as well, having background in the NHS, in hospitals, and also housing as well, which is a really interesting space at the moment. But where this all kind of started was Rebranding Safety, which is a podcast and a YouTube channel. And that started about 5 years ago, and has actually become quite popular. The whole notion of it is to try and change the brand of safety. People go, health and safety, QI role and so on. Fast forward 5 years later, that started, led on to Fluent, which is a consultancy, which actually tries to walk the walk of what we've been talking about in rebranding safety. The whole reason why we do that is because this image here on the left-hand side of the screen is a screenshot from an Instagram story from UK trade skills courses, which is stereotypically how safety is being portrayed. That guy looks to be working in a finished property, which pretty much has very little risk, yet is absolutely covered head to toe in PPE. It's completely unnecessary. And that is really how safety is portrayed. And that is how safety is kind of actually practiced. And how it's kind of done is pretty much just, we collect a load of badges, like we're in the Scouts again. So you'll go to a business and they'll have ISO this and ISO that, SSIP this and SSIP that, and have loads and loads of badges, which we'll talk about whether they actually mean anything later on, or they might have some high-level statements like safety is our top priority, or safety 100%, which frankly is just complete bullshit. No company has safety at the top of their priority. Probably only one company in the world should have it, or in the UK at least, should have it as their top priority, probably the enforcer. Other than that, really everyone else is a balancing act between all of your risks. And then the next one is lots and lots of paperwork, which is the clipboard on the left-hand side of the screen. And that's pretty much how safety has been done for a very long time. That creates a knock-on perception. These are some screenshots from a Facebook post where you can see on the far end side of the screen, it's a post of somebody complaining about the amount of PPE they have to wear in summertime. This was not actually in the heat wave we had in 2022. This was actually a couple of years ago. And these are just two examples of the comments that were in there. One says, F something, health and safety. You can work out what that's trying to say itself. The image you can't really see because it's quite small, but it's actually a definite poor job of scaffolding underneath. And then someone actually says we get more done without health and safety, which I think is quite an interesting insight into like this trade-off between safety is naturally slower, more focused, and that means you're not quick, you're not efficient, you're not making money. And this is a hard balance, hence why we say safety first and things like that don't really make sense. Unfortunately, there's a really knock-on trade-off to this, and the result of that is in 2021 to 2022, 123 people died at work, and that is the names of all of those people that died in that year. I've been looking at a figure similar to that for the last 10 years, because over the last decade in the UK, it's been the same. It's been about 130 to 140 every single year. So actually that year, 123 people, the safety professional will say that's good. That's an improvement, which is actually really hard to see. There's actually a father and son in there. Think third row down to the far left, see David Bottomley. Then on the next one, Clayton Bottomley is 17. So his dad, age 54, and his son, age 17, were on a construction lift that failed, and they both unfortunately fell to their death. Each one of these is a really horrific story, no matter who it is or what it is, but I think it's just really helpful and insightful to think that the last few slides is how we talk about safety and how we think about safety, but ultimately, how do the people that are related or know these people think about safety? And as a result of that, we started Rebranding Safety, kind of for those people, for those stats, but also just to really change the brand and the way that people think and talk about safety. It turns out quite a lot of people resonated with that. We're actually just shy of 4,000 subscribers now, which I think for a safety channel is just madness. So 4,000 people subscribe on the YouTube channel. The podcast is a little bit bigger. It's around 5,000, which is really nice. And we really try to hit a different style, a modern YouTube style, with the thumbnails and so on, and it's still a learning art. And this top one there, safety unboxing. Don't know if anybody watches Casey Neistat on YouTube, but he used to do mail time. I've always wanted to do that, but no one sends a safety guy free shit. Finally, we did get a box of free stuff, so we managed to do an unboxing. So it's like one of my proudest videos, and we got a proper video editor to do that video, and it's just one of my favourite videos now. That again has become recognised wider within the safety profession for the last 2 years in a row. Was voted as a top influencer, most influential individual in safety 2 years in a row, and also the podcast is the top 10 health and safety. Then we started doing Fluent, and we started working in the business world, and thinking this is going to be a hard slog. But then in our first year, we won the Young Business Person of the Year, of which Kerry was with us. Thank you very much. But there was a nice recognition from the business community that actually they were kind of resonating with this approach as well. So what is this approach that we're talking about? Well, actually, one of the things we say at Fluent is we actually don't want people to be safe, because safe to date has meant, like I've said, collecting badges and paperwork that actually doesn't really do much within your organisation. And that then creates a false sense of safety. I know loads of companies think they're phenomenally amazing because they've got ROSPA Gold Awards or ISO 45001 or whatever badge it is, and actually in real life they've got no idea what the working reality looks like. So we actually try to help businesses be a bit smarter. We talk about risk management, we don't talk about safety. So we want you to be smart, we want you to understand what work really looks like, we want you to understand what your job actually is. And we want you to design in success, not really hope for the best, which is what most businesses do. They just kind of hope that the worst doesn't happen. Has anyone in the room heard of Deepwater Horizon? If you haven't heard of it, you can watch a film which is not very much like the real case, because Mark Wahlberg is just muscly and running around and saving everyone. But in the real life, Deepwater Horizon is a really interesting case study. So in April 2010, in the Macondo prospect, there was a blowout that caused a big explosion on the rig. It killed 11 crewmen, but the fireball was actually visible 40 miles away. So it just shows you how big that fire was. But the big shock here was that it actually sank and left the well just gushing with oil, and to date is the biggest oil spill in history. It's an absolute massive incident. Really, really interestingly, there were 2 BP executives on the rig that day. So if you don't know how rigs work, essentially BP, Shell, they own the right to drill in that spot, and they'll kind of subcontract out the people that run the rig. Very similar to construction in the UK now. So a lot of it is subcontracted. So BP were actually on the rig that day, 2 senior execs. Let's have a guess. Hands up who they think they were on that rig because they were assessing production rates. Anyone think they were on there going for production rates? Yep, we're going for one there. Or maybe they were doing a leadership tour. Anyone think they were going around to do a leadership tour? Maybe. Sorting out an ongoing issue. Maybe there because there was a big problem. No. What about, do you think they were on site presenting a safety award? 1 vote for safety award. That is what they were on site to do. They were on site to celebrate that this rig was the safest rig that they had, and that it had gone a number of years without what's called an LTI, lost time incident. And on that day it blew up. You couldn't have asked for a better case study for me to say that how you're measuring safety doesn't work. Unfortunately, people don't really listen. Off the back of that, there's some great academia, some great science have come up with a phrase called workers imagine, workers done. So what that means is typically your managing director, your board level have a perception of work that is typically very far from the reality. We use the iceberg a lot of the time. Managing directors see a bit of work, so they see what work looks like a little bit, and not just for small businesses or big businesses as well. Boardrooms will see a bit of the iceberg, which is work. They'll also be influenced by the clouds and the seagulls and all of this stuff, the weather on the outside of the ocean. Obviously, this is a metaphor. If you're not getting it, work it out. Then the middle management see a little bit of both. They're probably in what I think one of the toughest positions, because they're trying to deal with both worlds. They see a bit of the weather on top. They see a little bit of what the management sees, that top end iceberg, and they see a little bit of below the water as well. You can see a little bit of reality, of work in reality. And we call that work as observed or demonstrated, because typically when that that manager is on the shop floor, the work they see is still not reality. So if anyone's been in a work environment where they've said, oh, the boss is coming around tomorrow, make sure you clean up, or we're getting an audit tomorrow, make sure we clean up. If you do clean up, you're actually contributing to exactly what happened with BP. You're creating a false sense of work. And then there's work as done, the murky, volatile underwater that no one really sees. And this actually happens in the smallest of business. We always think this is, this BP because they're massive. This actually happened with a client of ours just as we onboarded them. They had no idea that one of their employees was not wearing their steel toe caps because they didn't find them uncomfortable. We found this out because that employee unfortunately slipped on the ice and broke his ankle. Now, I don't think the steel toe caps would have actually helped him not slip because, contrary to popular belief, they're not actually very grippy, the safety boots. But it was interesting that we found that out and the MD had no idea. So there you go, workers don't work as imagined. Another medium-sized business we did some work with, probably large to be fair, had no idea that employees were required to bring in their own tools to build some of the biggest JCB competitor style equipment. Had no idea that these people would bring their own drills in and stuff, and that the company didn't provide that. When we told him, he was like, what? No, we give them our own tools. And then the manager went, no, they've always brought in their own. This happens in every single organisation. It doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, you will not have a true reflection of reality. So human error exists within all of that. And we typically say, remember that old saying, I think it was from, can't remember that really good boxer, but anyway, he says everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Same thing. Every company's got a risk assessment until you turn up on the job. So particularly these kind of trade-based engineering type roles. So what can we kind of do about that? Learn about work in reality. Get on the shop floor, get off your bums, get out of the office, get out of the meetings, go and understand what work looks like. Try and build a good relationship with your employees. Try and understand the pressures and the things that are influencing them. When we do exercises like that, we can take a simple error, like a forklift truck driving pallets, carrying a pallet and dropping it. That's what this was for, and these were all the things that we found out that might be contributing to that. All we did was ask a room of people, give us one thing at a time, and we keep going until everyone's rang out something. That essentially is the context. That's all the things that could contribute to an incident happening. But we think it was just Bob driving like an idiot. It's just Bob being an idiot. It's not. Bob actually comes to work 9 times out of 10 to do a really good job, and this is kind of where risk Fluent start to stand out. We can also understand how an organisation thinks. They think, in fact, to balancing all three of these, economic failure. We want to make sure we pay everyone and make sure we make profit. We want to make sure we do a good job and make sure we do it safely. As an organisation, we're trying to balance all three of those. So things like safety first doesn't make sense. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. We're actually trying to balance all those things. We need to make money. To lay everyone off would probably be equally as upsetting to having a serious incident. Humans have 2 types of brains, so we can start to build an awareness of how the human thinks and how the human works. We have slow brain, which is where we're really slow, we're really critical. We think about things, we've got a high level of self-awareness, but it is slow. And we don't really want to be in that all the time. It's also very exhausted. If you've been around the Expo today, you'll be in slow brain a lot of the day. So when you get home tonight, you'll be absolutely exhausted. Fast brain will be tomorrow when you're back doing your normal work and you're not really concentrating, you're just getting the job done. When you're driving home, that's fast brain, autopilot. You've been doing that drive all day long, all year long, whatever. So you know exactly what to do. That's from Daniel Kahneman. His book is really good. Don't listen to it on Audible. The guy that narrates it is phenomenally boring. So you can start to think about those stuff. You can also start to think how teams perform together, their attitudes, and think about failing safety and building layers of safety. High performance typically is 3 things: having a clarity of what we're doing and what I'm doing and what you're doing within that team, being motivated to work for the company, motivated to do that job, maybe even motivated for that customer, and feeling psychologically safe, which is feeling safe to speak up, feeling safe to say, there's something not right with this job, or I don't agree with that idea, boss. One of the things you can do right away, no matter where you are in your organisation, but particularly if you're a senior leader in your organisation, is think about your own attitude. There's something called Batari's box, which I think is a really simple thing that we can all take away. My attitude affects my behaviour. My behaviour then affects your attitude, and your attitude affects your behaviour. Your behaviour then affects my attitude, and so on. So you can really start to see how you turning up in a bad mood can then spiral, and you end up having a phenomenally bad day. If that happens again and again and again, that eventually just becomes your culture. When we talk about risk management, we think about building layers. Start at the top of that triangle. Try not to do the job. Try to avoid it. Obviously, we can't do that most of the time. We need to get the job done. So can we do it in a different way? Typically, we can't do that. After that line, try and build layers of all of this stuff that we've talked about. And a really good example of that would be COVID. This is called the Swiss cheese. Sorry, I'm moving away from the mic. But this is called the Swiss cheese model. So I don't know if anyone saw this, but essentially you can see the virus on the left-hand side of the screen and the person on the other side of the screen, or left, right, the virus one, person the other. And the virus is kind of getting weaker and weaker as it goes through each of these layers of mitigation. And that's layers of safety. It's layers of risk management, so to speak, physical distancing, masks, so on and so on and so on and so on. And you can do the same thing in your business, no matter what the risk is, but COVID was such a good example of how the government did build layers of safety. So when we were all bickering about how effective or non-effective masks were, it was kind of a pointless conversation to have. It was one of many. So this ineffectiveness or effectiveness is kind of a pointless argument. It's meant to be a complementary factor. So essentially what we like to say is that smart businesses, they're not safe, they're risk fluent. Thank you very much for listening.